Hey everyone, Brad Bradford here, downtown Toronto at 1:30 Adelaide, and I'm about to go and have a conversation with Som Seif. Som is the co-founder of Wealthsimple. He's the founder of Purpose, and he's a man who leads by example. We're gonna have a conversation about Toronto, this country, accountability, and personal growth. Let's go check it out.
Toronto is a city of 630 square kilometers, with 158 neighborhoods and more than 3 million people, each with their own story to tell. This is For the Love of TO with Brad Bradford.
Welcome back to For the Love of TO. I'm Brad Bradford, and today we're joined by someone who has had a profound influence on Canada's financial landscape and who brings just as much thoughtfulness to giving back to Toronto. Som Seif is the founder and CEO of Purpose and co-founder of Wealthsimple. He's a friend and somebody I admire tremendously for both his business success and his commitment to city building. Welcome to For the Love of TO, Som.
Great to be here, Brad. And I love that we're doing this, and I love this podcast. I've really enjoyed all the episodes you've been running with.
You know, it's cool. So many people have a podcast, and I understand why, because it's an opportunity to sit down and have thoughtful and engaging conversations with really terrific people. So lucky to have you here. And I want to talk off the top a little bit about your sort of journey and what it's like being here in Toronto. Where'd you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Unionville, actually. So Unionville, we immigrated as a family when I was 3. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, and through the conversation about how much gratitude and debt of gratitude I have to this country and, of course, to this city. But I grew up in Unionville, migrated down to North York, went to high school there, and then migrated down to downtown, when I went to University of Toronto, and then did my professional career from there on and lived in the city from there on. And, I'm a Toronto boy all through and through, and, love it dearly, and have kind of migrated from the suburbs down to the core. So
In your journey, both professionally and as a family, was there ever any contemplation of being somewhere other than Toronto, or has it always been Toronto?
First off, I didn't have the original choice, and I have a deep thanks to my parents for making the choice that they did. They chose Canada, and it was actually a really amazing story as to why they did that. But the opportunity that it gave me was massive. But thereafter, every single time I've had the choice, I've opted and chosen to stay in Toronto. And look, as your career grows, as you build and you think about opportunities, you always are looking at where's the best probability of success, where should you be? And, there's, more and more, of course, pull, and over the last 20 years to be in the United States. And I've always said, Toronto is the place I want to build. This is the place I want my family to be raised and to grow up. And more importantly, I want to build on behalf of this country and this city. And so very, very proud of what I do. And today, there's not even a question of where I want to be and where we will be for the rest of our lives.
When I talk to a lot of business leaders here in this city, that is a common thread, is such a deep commitment and resolve to stay here. Because you're right, there are a lot of push factors and there's a lot of pull factors into other markets, sometimes from a business perspective. But that's something I hear over and over again from the folks who are in Toronto, is how important it is to be here. What does that look like in terms of, building a business, having access to talent, bringing new ideas to market? What does the city play in terms of a role in doing that?
Well, so first and foremost, I think that Canada has and Toronto has some of the best talent in the world. Like, whether we're talking about academic talent, research, young knowledge workers, any talent you want, Toronto is and has some of the best talent in the world. To your point, there is always a sucking sound in the United States or into other parts of the world that are, call it, pulling people away. And then the question is, what we really have to focus on is what's the thing that's pushing people away. And so there are forces, and what you do have to do is you have to be deliberate and be very focused. I look at it as oftentimes people take the easy route out. Go to the US, go to Silicon Valley, go somewhere else, because it's easy. You don't have to work as hard to get the capital, to get your ideas, to find great scaling talent, to work alongside of. In Canada, you have to just be more deliberate. And so, I've built a number of great businesses. I've built a great career. I've done some amazing things. I'm really proud of it. I've done it from here. And I have, there's lots of friction along the way. However, I think it's really important to recognize that you can build phenomenal world-class businesses from Toronto, and all the talent you need is here. What you need is the ambition, you need the focus, and you need to work a little harder to overcome some of the, call it, conditions that aren't, easy. I think it's an excuse to say you can't build great companies and world-class companies from Canada.
We'll talk about some of the challenges and overcoming them, but let's go back a few years ago and more to the beginning. You were one of the co-founders of Wealthsimple, which is a company most folks listening to this will be familiar with. What was the genesis for that, and was that your first shot at building a business, or had you started a couple things prior?
Yeah.
Because that was a big one.
So my first business, actually, I was 28. I left RBC and I started a company that was really innovating in financial services around ETFs. And that business, I was, so naive, had no idea what I was doing, but I had an ambition, and I focused on doing something that was really value add. And I had a vision for how the industry should evolve. And ultimately, it became a hugely successful business, and we sold it to BlackRock. It became part of the BlackRock iShares family. And so now I'm 35 years old. I'm still, I've got a chip on my shoulder because I'm still young and hungry. But I also had this confidence that said, okay, I can do this again. So I built a vision right away for purpose. And I also built a vision for the sort of broader financial services industry, which included what became the Wealthsimple story, right? And so I started Purpose in 2013. Had great energy, building it up. And then about a year into starting Purpose, I started to say, okay, I want to build this other part of the business, which was all about how can we help revolutionize the way that individuals at any stage, whether they're just starting out in their financial journey or late in their financial journey, can get access to excellent financial services support, but also supporting them regardless of if their wealth is small or large. But really building the technology, the infrastructure to enable that, and also a vision for how we deliver product. And I had this vision, and then ultimately I was sort of struggling with who to partner with, who to build it with. And somebody in my office kind of said, hey, you should meet this young kid who just came back from the Valley, and he wants to do something similar. And that ended up being Mike Katchen, who's my co-founder there. And Mike and I got together. I said, let's meet. We got together, and I just fell in love with him from day one.
You didn't know him prior?
No, I fell in love with him. He came in the office, and then I just said to him, Mike, I want to do this. You want to do this? We can do this separately, or we can do this together. And a week later, we basically started the principles of what Wealthsimple became. I'm so proud of what the team has done. My job has always been to support Mike and the founding team of really supporting them in building and executing that business. And I think that today it is one of the most important challengers to the big six Canadian banks. But more importantly, putting people into a position where we're showing people what great can look like. And that's what all of my career has been about. It's like, I just think about how can we show Canadians what great looks like. Canada has phenomenal financial services, big banks, but I believe that they're not globally competitive, meaning that when you think about their situation, they are about protecting the current state, not thinking about how can we win for the long run for Canadians. And that has a huge fundamental friction and drag on our economic growth and productivity as a country and our individuals ultimately succeeding. And when you see a player, a challenger like Wealthsimple come to the market and really change the mindsets of how individuals get access to great financial services at any scale, but more importantly, helping push the financial incumbents to get better at delivering value add, or they'll lose their customers. This is what really it's all about. This is what competition and how it wins for your population in a deep way.
I was just going to say the competitive element of that and pushing the sort of big six and other challenger institutions to drive more is so important. And I think competition as a theme, whether we're talking about cities or businesses or countries, needs to be a driving force because it pushes all of us to deliver more value, better performance, more accountability. It has to be woven into our institutions, our companies, our agencies through and through to the core.
And that's exactly right. I mean, a city has to think this way. Businesses have to think this way. It's all about how can we be better. Individuals have to think this way, which is how do we be better every single day versus, oh, we're comfortable with where we are. And Toronto, I think, has the attributes and the ability to be a world-class city. It's not there today, but we should have the ambition to be there. And the problem is that if we sit there and say, hey, let's sort of manage Toronto as it is today, then we're going to be managing in decline.
Right.
Whereas what about managing in growth? How do we always be in the position of we want to be the best city in the world? That's our marker. And what does it look like to be the best city in the world? And so you have to have that mindset as a candidates for mayor, as councillors, as a population of citizens. Everyone has to be thinking that way. And it's not good enough just to sort of sit back and say, let's just do what's comfortable and what's easy. Let's be the best. And I think that I come from that mindset. I am a growth-oriented person. I think about willingness to challenge, to take risks where we need to, but be willing to understand when we're wrong and reverse those decisions. And that's what allows you to be successful in the long run, because you're willing to put more attempts at bat.
That sounds like great leadership. Can I ask a little bit about sort of the genesis of Wealthsimple? Something struck me there. The idea that all Canadians should have access to high quality financial advice. And I can tell you, for somebody with a modest net worth, where most of, what I've been able to build is actually tied up in my house and my mortgage. I hear from folks all over the city all the time about this feeling like they're being squeezed, this feeling like the social contract of, go to school, get a job, work hard, and put yourself on a pathway to prosperity, that's falling away. And how does a product like the services offered by Wealthsimple or Purpose sort of counteract that force? Because I could tell you, like, for households like mine and many others, you pay your rent, you pay your mortgage, you pay your childcare bills, you put gas in the tank and food on the table. There's not a lot of money left over at the end of the month for savings, for investment. Even though we do well by a lot of metrics and a lot of standards, it's just so increasingly unaffordable in cities like Toronto. The idea of saving for the future is kind of a pipe dream, because it's like, I just got to get through the month and manage my cash flow. So where do you guys come in providing the type of sound investment and advice and access to people to those tools, so that they might actually be able to start putting things away and see some of that wealth grow?
Yeah, there's so much to talk and unpack there, because we can get into call it housing and affordability and affordability challenges that people face as to why people are feeling like they're being pinched all the time, which we should spend some time on. But I would say it starts with building a system that is actually accessible, easy, and not high, call it friction to get involved. So if you go to a bank today and you have less than $250,000 or $500,000, with all due respect, you're treated pretty poorly. You're getting thrown into, high cost products. You're not getting good advice. All that stuff leads to, feeling like you're not actually being productive. You're not going to actually get somewhere, right? And you're not getting really good advice in many ways. And so the principle, and that starts with this mindset that, that there's a fundamental technical component to it, that the financial services industry is a business that has always had big margins. It's a very successful industry, makes lots of profits, but it also has what we call average economics models, which is that on average, our customers make us money. And so what on average economics means is that you think that the larger someone is, they make you more money than someone who's smaller. So this mindset has shifted into the way the industry operated, and was a key stasis that the industry was operating under, which was like, hey, if you have a small account, like $50,000 or $5,000, $200,000, you don't make us a lot of money, so we really don't want to serve you, so we have to charge you a lot of fees. And my thesis and Mike's thesis was always, no, you can actually, with technology, with infrastructure, with servicing, with call it streamlining what you do and servicing for customers, you can actually make money for a customer with a $5,000 account and get them started and get them going and start to help them build that first set of assets and portfolio, give them confidence to keep compounding in really good product investments, but without a huge drag of expenses or costs associated with it. And that was the foundations. And so just that simple principle of getting started early, getting on a plan, building that confidence to start to build in savings and regular budgeting for that in your daily lives, in your annual lives, and then building the foundations of the starting point. There's a great article in the Globe and Mail this week about a young couple who bought their first home, $1 million home, Mississauga, and they talk about the journey they had to go through and the choices they had to make to ultimately get to their first $100,000 of cash using the Wealthsimple portfolios to allow them to do that. But every decision along the way was a budgeting decision to allow them to do that. They got their $100,000 and allowed them to buy their first home. And they talk about this fallacy that is, it's impossible to buy a home, but it takes work. And you need to have the right financial platform to partner with to allow you to do that. And that's what a firm like Wealthsimple does. That's what firms like Purpose do. We really want to help people feel confident that they're going to be successful. I think that the second component of that is your question on like, why do people feel like they're being pinched? Look, at the end of the day, if you look at the bargain that we all have, which is go to university, get a nice job, make a nice income. At the end of the day, like, the probability of all that working for you and saving and doing all these things, while also being able to build a family and have a home and all the rest of it, has just become really difficult. And, we've talked about this before, but like the percentage of your income that's going to your housing has increased so dramatically that, you don't actually have a lot of money left over for all the other things. And so this is a big issue because remember 40, 50 years ago when housing was a priority, people had deep defined benefit pension plans. So their company would actually take care of the savings for them, the retirement plan. So they didn't have to worry about saving as much. They could focus their income on their housing. Now, over the last 40 years, we've moved away from defined benefit pension plans. So most individuals have to save through their accounts of their income. And now you're squeezing all that into their income stream. And we aren't ultimately, with the cost of housing going up, cost of groceries going up, cost of all this, life going up, and then daycare and all the things if you have kids, all of this stuff is squeezing that income level. Even though someone might be making $150,000 or a household might be making great income, in Toronto, that still is probably in some cases below the poverty line. And that's a real issue. That's where people are squeezed the most. And I think you need a financial system that supports those partners and giving them a great access to get going. Every $500, every $5, whatever it is, you're going to start with savings, you're going to get going and you're going to feel like you're wanted and you're welcome and you're going to be treated well. But at the same time, we also need a system that allows people to feel like if I'm making up double what the Canadian household income is in Toronto, I shouldn't be feeling like I'm on the poverty line.
So much about that, and every journey starts with a single step, right? That's the cliche. But how do you, and this would be important for your customers, like how do you remove the barriers so that it's not so overwhelming for people to take that first step, to put that first, $500 in an account, to open the account and start investing? Like that must be something you think a lot about. How do we get people on board? But you look at all the products out there, you look at all the competing interests, the time, the challenges, the stress of family life, the stress of work, to set aside the time and say, you know what? I'm going to go on that website. I'm going to open up an account. I'm going to link it into my checking account. I'm going to auto deposit the $500 a paycheck, whatever. How do you get people to do that?
Well, first you make it easy.
Yeah.
So go back to 10 years ago when Wealthsimple was just getting started. Opening an account was a tedious. You didn't have DocuSign. You had to everything.
Pulling out the check and looking at the numbers.
Yeah. 30 days later, you might have an account set up, and then you got to find a way to transfer the money and all the rest of it. It's it's really, really challenging. Wealthsimple, all these accounts now, and it's because of competition, of innovation that drives this change. Everyone's getting better. Like this is a really key mantra for me, which is that there's no market share in financial services. All you're doing is, trying to innovate from the front and then raise the bar so that everyone else catches up. And that's how you help Canadians ultimately get better, right? But with Wealthsimple, they've been doing that. But principally, the concept is make it easy. Open an account in 5 minutes and you can fund it in 5 minutes. So that idea that I only have 10 minutes to do this or 30 minutes to do this, I can actually have my account funded in a very short period of time. So I'm productive right off the start. Make it easy. Second, talk to people like they're humans. The financial services industry is a self-centered industry. We talk about us. We talk about, let me tell you about why I'm so good. Let me tell you why we're the best. Why what we do is so great. It's not about us. It's about the clients. It's about Canadians. It's about their goals, what they're trying to do. And so you got to talk to them like it's, you're talking to people like it's about them. So you make it welcoming. You talk to them like they're humans. You talk in terms that are, easy to really grasp about what life is about goals, about outcomes you're trying to achieve. And that's a really important principle. So, I think Wealthsimple's done a phenomenal job of revolution. I think Purpose, my previous one in Claymore, we really focused on revolutionizing the way you communicate what it is that you do for individuals. And I think that's a really powerful component. And then third is you add a lot of value. You put good products in the marketplace that actually is known to long-term, make people successful. And so you do those three things, you don't charge a lot of fees, ultimately people will be happy. And that's how you get people going. At the same time, recognize that. I remember my whole vision is, people should be, the majority of wealth, this is the fallacy. People think they're going to get rich in the markets or by investing. No. Investing is there to augment the wealth that you save. You get rich or you become, successful in your capital by actually investing in yourself. You go to school, you get a career, you get an education, you start your career, you start at a base salary as X, you invest in and get curious and keep growing yourself, and you get promotions, your salary goes up, and every single time you have, your top line salary, you have your expenses, and then you have something that falls at the bottom line, hopefully some savings, and that grows. And as your top line grows, because you were investing in yourself, you ultimately bottom line, your savings should grow as well. And as long as you don't get yourself on that treadmill and that doesn't allow for that, but you got to be really disciplined around that. But the actual thing that most people should do to create long-term wealth and prosperity is invest in themselves. 99% of your time should be focused on yourself, not on the markets and what Nvidia did last week or whatever it be, but on building your prosperity through earning greater income, getting greater opportunities, winning in those types of ways. The bottom line, though, is that you want to have a savings and infrastructure, a support system that actually helps you augment that and make that money that you save be productive. And that's what, you compound that for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you'll be hugely successful. And so if you're 23 and I would say, you come out of university, you start saving on your first paycheck and you just keep doing it from there on, and you put it into a great portfolio that is going to ultimately compound. When you're 55, 60 years old, you're going to wake up and you're going to realize I am as prosperous as I never ever needed to be in my life. It's just disciplines.
So, and for folks that might be listening and are sort of thinking, man, I'd love to reverse the clock, go back 15 years, wish I had that advice then, or listen to that advice if it was given. Like, is there an element where people feel hopeless, like they can never get there, so no point in starting now, I'll take the vacation, I'll buy the fancy car or whatever, because it just seems so far off being able to achieve what you just outlined with compounding interest and having that bank account when you're 55 and looking at it and feeling good about it?
No, I think it's a choice.
And
Frankly,
even if you haven't started
I don't care where you are in your life, it's start with your next paycheck.
right.
At the end of the day, it is a principle of process. Like, so you think about if you have 40 years of compounding, or 30 years of compounding, it's wonderful. But if that shortens down to 20 years, it just means you have to invest a little bit more. You have to make harder choices around your savings programs, and you have to be really, really deliberate. And everyone has the ability to make the choices.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is you have to make that choice. And so I actually disagree with it entirely. Like, I like, it goes back to the earlier comment. Like, the first thing is, what are we doing in the lifestyle that I'm living relative to the goals that I have? And that's a really important one. And in Toronto, and how do we make Toronto a city where someone can earn a good income, have a family, the household makes good money, take care of your kids, raise them, have a roof over your head, whether that's a rental or a home that you bought, and ultimately, do well and be prosperous while also saving some money every single year that is ultimately going to compound. That is the bigger challenge. And if we can get that middle part, the expense structure of an individual, to be really, really structurally right, and make sure that everyone is focused on the top line, which is I'm going to keep investing in myself to grow my top line, then the bottom line actually is a thing, the easiest part of it. And it's just a discipline. So that's how I look at it. And, but it is choices along the way. I find, people can make excuses all the time. There are real challenges, but there's also a lot of excuses, which is, oh, I really want that. I want that Lexus in the driveway. Well, do we need a Lexus? Like, okay, yeah, it's only $200 more a month in payments. Okay, well, what if we got a really nice Toyota and it's $200 less? That's $200 a month in savings that you could theoretically put back into your savings account. So these are choices that we live. We get on a treadmill, we make these choices, and I think that we can ultimately make different choices if we were serious about it.
So let's shift to government a little bit, because governments and budgets, federal, provincial, municipal, it's all about choices. And here in Toronto, property tax has gone up nearly 25% over the past 3 years. It seems like with elected officials and leaders, there is a real reticence to make choices, to do the type of prioritization that would align with the focus of what that local government needs to do. And hearing you talk about the choices we all make as individuals, family, households, as consumers, I see some similarities there. It's harder to make choices. It's harder to prioritize. And I think when you look at governments here in this country, when you look at the city of Toronto, there's a tendency to try and be all things to all people. And you don't want to say no, because nobody wants to say no. Like when my daughters were at the dollar store and Briar wants another toy or more candy or something, I don't like saying no to her.
That's right.
But like sometimes you have to.
That's right.
What would be a different sort of approach to government in having more focus and having more fiscal and financial discipline so that the answer to every problem isn't more taxes, more fees, more staff?
Yeah. So look, it's the hardest thing that in life is to make choices, right? And what you really have to start with, what are the most important things that we can't get wrong? So, being all things to everybody is actually a death knell, in my opinion. If you try, like, it doesn't matter if you're a business, if you're an individual, I want everyone to like me. That's an impossible thing. Like, not everyone's going to like you. And in fact, what you by trying to do that, you're actually going to find that no one will like you. You got to be really, really focused on who is the most important. And the same with running a business or running a city. And so when you're thinking about this, what I always start with, what are the things that are our biggest opportunities that if we get them right, they'll make all the difference. Everything will be wonderful. And you got to pick those. Those are your top. And that might be 5 things, it might be 3 things, it might be 10 things, whatever it is. When it starts to get beyond 5, you start to make some, probably some challenges there. The second thing is then you have to fix it. I always say it's all about growth. I believe I just come from this view that if individuals are growing, if communities are growing, if cities are growing, countries are growing, and businesses are growing, then ultimately growth solves all problems, right? So, yes, taxes, it's an easy thing to do to tax people when you're sort of flat, but when they're growing, you don't need to increase taxes, it just naturally happens, right? So growth really is a key thing that you always want to prioritize. The challenge, of course, is that you got to build the fabrics that while you're growing, you're also creating the stability and the infrastructure that people don't get left behind. And that's where you have to be really, really careful and delicate on what's the role of a city and the government in ensuring we have the conditions for us to have growth. Yet at the same time, we have the structure and the foundations, the fabric that everyone is ultimately not going to be left behind. And those are the things that I think are really important. And in there is a set of choices. There are going to be things that you'll have to say, we just can't do them anymore. And that's where I think public-private partnerships come in. That's where philanthropy comes in, where people who really care about these things are going to have to play a bigger role. And in fact, if people are growing and things are going well in the city, then there will be a lot more of that to basically make sure that they fill in those gaps. But beyond that, the city is going to have to make choices. And right now, I think the problem we have in Toronto is we've not made those choices. We want to be a world-class city, but we want to be everything to everybody. And the reality is that if you look at the best cities in the world, the cities that truly are world-class, they've made choices of who they are, what their identity is, and they've been very deliberate about not, giving up on those.
Why do you think it's so hard to be able to have that mission clarity and that focus? Is it just that desire of like, want everybody to like me when I walk into a room?
Yeah.
Or is it like, some individuals might not actually know what the most important thing is? Like why are you able to do it in a business capacity and people who are successful building things are able to do it, but governments always fall down?
I think it starts with a mandate for the mayor, right? Like I think a mayor needs a mandate to ultimately have the decisions and the authority. In business, you have a CEO, you have a leader, you have a management team. They have the authority to make decisions and make choices. And in fact, the wider you make those, call it decisions or the authority of those decisions, then the more things get thrown into it. So I think you need a mayor in a structure in governance that allows for, your mayor to have a much more control over what ultimately is going to be done. So that's a really important thing. You need the right dynamics around them, the right support system. I think that's generally in government, it is a bit of like, I want to get elected. I need everyone to like me and all the rest of that. But like, I come from the view that, look, you got to go in, you got to, if you're good at what you do and you execute on a vision, make the city better, people will elect you by virtue of that. And if you didn't do it, then you won't get elected. But that's the way I always look at it. So
it's performance and accountability, and the electorate is the ultimate decider on that.
exactly.
It's interesting as a business leader and somebody who has built things and somebody who employs folks. How many people are at Purpose?
So at Purpose, we're 340 people today.
Yeah, that's incredible. So, creating value for the country, creating value for your employees and for your team here. But the Canadian business community, the Toronto business community has, I think, had a bit of an awakening over the past, let's say, 5 years about the sort of national conversation about our economy, about our politics. And there are different folks who have rallied to not just be on the sidelines anymore, but be engaged. And a few weeks back, we had Lucy Hargraves on the podcast talking about Build Canada and the mission around that. And I know you were one of the founders and early sort of folks involved in that. Why do you think the Canadian business community is now taking a proactive position in terms of advancing policy and civic conversations about, the direction of this country?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's because people love this country and care deeply about it. And people always ask that, going back to that first conversation we had about like, where could you be? Where would you go? And there's always this assumption that you're going to leave. You're going to go somewhere else. It's going to be easier as an entrepreneur, as a builder. And if you actually talk to many of the individuals who are involved in Build Canada, it's actually the opposite. They care so deeply about this country that they want to stay and they want to really help this country be better. And they do it not because it's for their own sake, but it's because of the sake of this country being such an amazing place to be. And we all know Canada is one of the best places in the world. Toronto is one of the greatest cities in the world. We love it. We love it. We want it to be truly the best place in the world that everyone wants to come to and wants to stay here always. And we want to make it easier for people to build and do great things, because we believe that the more prosperous this country is, the more prosperous Canadians are. It's good. It's wonderful for
All
everybody.
boats
Right?
rise
Exactly.
together.
And it starts with a very simple foundation. I go back to that Canada has already established the foundational fabrics that, allow for society to thrive at the top end, to grow, to build and progress, while also making sure that no one gets left behind. This is like, America is amazing for many things, but that's the one thing that is their weakness, is that their trickle-down principles, their capitalist society, which on its, in many ways has worked. I mean, look at the economic growth and development they've had, but so much of America gets left behind. And so it really is a difficult place for half of the population. But for the other half, it's awesome. And the problem is that that's not a good system in the long run. It doesn't compound well if you keep adding that, which is what we're seeing today. Canada's done something different. And I think Canada has, a foundation that is strong. It needs more nurturing. It needs more investment to allow for that foundation to have the ability to continue to invest in it. And that's where growth is really important. GDP growth is critical. Like, people don't understand. Like, if you don't have economic growth, then people can invest back into the hospitals. We can invest back into this infrastructure and all the things that really matter in our day-to-day lives. We need actually the economic growth, taxes go up, all the rest of it. Because of that allows the governments to fund it. But more importantly, it also allows for philanthropy. Our good friend Peter Gilligan gave $50 million to Princess Margaret recently. Like, you allow for that type of stuff because you have a growth model that enables it. So you have to have a society, a country that really thinks about this. And government, in my opinion, is there to create that condition that allows for it. And I think over the last 15, 20 years, we have not created the conditions. And and this is something that is really important. It's small tweaks in the way we communicate as a country. What our Prime Minister today call leadership, and that changes the dynamic of what entrepreneurs think about, small business owners think about, everyone thinks about. And so they start to think differently about what their opportunity is, what they can do from here. And so leadership really matters, the voice of leadership. Second is on, the role that they play in executing. And I believe that, government shouldn't be the ones who are doing the execution. They're the ones who, all they have to do is make sure that we get the right regulation in place, make the right governance decisions, enable people to be, able to do the things they're doing without the huge frictions, get the right regulatory environment structure. So all these things matter, and that's what government should be doing. And then last is the government should be a risk taker and a support partner for the key areas, the priorities. What are the 3 or 4 most important things that we as a country have to get right? And if we get these things right, we win. And we're going to be a risk taker alongside of private capital, our citizens in doing so. And that's where government's role should be. They should be willing to put dollars at work in those areas. And when they do that well, it's magic, because builders will then feel confident that they've got a partner, not someone who's going to get in their way. So that's what I get excited about. This is what Build Canada is all about. And all we wanted to do was say, look, we see this, we're doing this in the business world. How do we help our government and Canadians see all the really great low-hanging fruit that we have in front of us to be the best country in the world?
I'm a big fan of the idea, a big fan of the platform, and many of the folks who are involved in it. But you as a leader have not shied away from advancing these sort of positions. You've penned op-eds over the years that, frankly, have made, I think, fair critiques of some of the, the policies and the directions of different governments at different times. But that's not easy to do. In fact, like most people, in your position as CEO of a big company, most people don't do that.
Yeah.
Why have you been able to find the courage to go forward and do that in a way that I think is helpful for a national or civic conversation, but in a way that a lot of folks in these other towers down here in the downtown core are not prepared to do?
One, because they sort of are there to represent a much bigger audience of their shareholders, their board, all these things like that, their business interests. I look at it very solely. It says, I'm here to support Canada. And that's what I'm in Toronto and making this the greatest place. And, we only learn through communication, through ideas, through sharing of knowledge, and more importantly, through debate. And so I don't have all great ideas, but at least at the minimum, when I see bad ideas, I'm going to challenge them. And we're going to talk about that. And so we have to speak up on it. And second is, I do think that principles really matter in life and everything we're doing. As Canadians, we ultimately have to stand up for the country we love, but also we have to stand up and say, how can we be always better? I have a deep growth mindset. I have a curiosity to be better all the time. I'm always trying to be, learn and develop. And I expect that of my people. I expect that of my friends. I expect that of our country and our city and everything like that. So, to me, it's all about challenge and driving it. So I'm not afraid of having the discourse, the conversation. What I really care about, though, is that we need more leaders to do that. We need more leaders to be bold and articulate it. Now, what's really important is we also don't need people talking about things that they don't understand. Like what I don't like is all of a sudden somebody gets successful and they think they know everything and they can talk about everything. I try to talk and stay in my lane of what I know I'm good at and what I think I can add value at. But more importantly, I do think that we need expertise coming into the way we talk about policy and all the rest of it. And I think one of the things we're seeing right now in our federal government and a change is federal government is engaging with the business community, asking for ideas, asking for, what could we be doing better? Where's the friction in the system that doesn't allow us to grow or for you to build or do the things you're doing? And so we haven't had that for a long time. And that's why, communities like Build Canada and others are really powerful because they help enable that conversation and giving ideas. It's ultimately up to government to execute them and figure out what to do and choose the ones that are most important and what the population wants. But it is the ideas that ultimately float up that really drive it. So, what we should be always doing is sharing our ideas, being in service of the country, being in service of our government. So, Brad, you asked me to come and help in Toronto, I will be here in Toronto. If the federal government called me tomorrow and asked me to come and help with something, I will put my pens down here and go do that. If, the Ontario government asked me to come and do something, I will do it there too. It doesn't matter because that's what I love. And, I've been successful enough. I built a phenomenal group of people here at Purpose that operate the business every day. And it gives me the affordability, the time to be able to lean in if I need to and other things.
You push and you challenge yourself first and foremost, and you lead by example. You also push and challenge your team on that individual growth component that we've talked about. What is the culture like here at Purpose where you are really, on an annual basis, sort of a call to action to your team to challenge and to pursue personal growth? And, like bosses are always asking their team to sort of jump through all the hurdles and do a million things, but you've built this relationship with the people who choose to be here at Purpose. And part of that is a call to action to drive personal growth. Like, tell me about that philosophy.
Yeah. So first, it starts with a very basic principle. When I sold my first company, Claymore, one of the things I was most proud of, it was a great company, but what I was most proud of was I always looked at it as the people who came into the organization, left the organization on a different, call it, slope of their careers. They had grown meaningfully. They were, call it, on a trajectory. Wherever they went after the company, they were going to have a very different profile of their future state. And that was very important to me. And that made me realize what my job is as a business builder and a leader is not just building great businesses, it's about actually creating an environment for individuals to change and restructure the arc of their slope. That's what we call that here. So at Purpose, we've done this as a deep way. We invest heavily in growth mindsets, in coaching. We actually have our own high performance coach in the organization that works on staff, that works for a whole team to help them on how to be excellent, both as an individual and as a teammate to drive, call it, the progressive growth we want. But second is we have a demand and expectation of everyone in the organization to have that mindset as well, which is when you come into this company, we're going to create the conditions for you, but you have to also lean in as well. But one of the things I think I've shared with you is that, every year, I believe, we always go through like what's your New Year's resolutions about next year? What am I going to do differently? I look at it as what's the moment, what's the New Year's actually a moment to reflect on what you learned and developed and what you leaned into last year. So, a number of years ago, I talked about the principles of individual growth. And more importantly, as a knowledge-based business, which is we are a human-based business, we don't have, call it manufacturing facilities and all of
You're
our
not
business.
selling
No,
widgets.
our entire business is human capital,
Yeah.
intellectual capital. And so we grow by compounding our intellectual capital. And I would tell my people is that we are a purpose, some function, whether that's an addition or multiplication or exponential of the growth of our individuals. And so as they grow, we have the opportunity to grow. And at the same time, I also believe that if we're growing at a certain rate at this company, anybody who is growing at the same rate or slower is ultimately not keeping up to the purpose. And it's a kind of dilutive. And what we focus on is if you're growing faster than purpose, if you're not growing faster than purpose, it's actually an issue. So we really focus on how do we help people think about that. Now, growth does not mean just professional growth. It's about personal growth. It's about, the kinds of things that you want to be as an individual, as a human, as a family member, as a spouse, as a father, a mother, whatever it be that matters to you. How are you growing? And what I do is, a couple of years ago, I sent out a note talking about this. And then and I asked people, I challenged them, what networks have you built this year? How many people have you gone out and spent time with? How much knowledge did you go and be curious about it? What new role did you lean into? What opportunity, what projects did you take on? What personal growth did you do? What books did you read this year, if that was an important goal? What did you do differently with your family or with your kids? Like all that kind of stuff. And then what I do is now, every year, I just resend the same note with a small blurb at the top, just asking people, reflect on, this is a year-over-year marker, what did you do last year? And now it's a reminder to people to say, if you're not growing, you may say you want to, you have this ambition, but then really reflect on whether or not you're actually applying yourself to it. And my hope is, as a leader, is to show it in the way I own actions, but two is to remind people, give them a big sort of splash on the face to say, are you growing at the pace you want to? Are you leaning into this the way you need to? Because, at the end of the day, people always want, what can you do? I want to earn more money. I want to do all this. Great. But it's a dual role. The company has to be able to do that for you and give you the opportunities, and you have to lean into it. So it's a partnership in ultimately your end state of growth. So that's what I care about. And I will say that, I think it's a wonderful thing. There are individuals that have the self-ambition, the self-motivation to constantly be curious and in that, call it 1% growth every day. And there are others who just need a reminder, a constant kind of push and pull into it. But I believe everybody has the capacity to grow. And growth is ultimately, it might go back to solves all problems.
So it's interesting. We're sitting here in your office at 130 Adelaide. You don't even have a door on it. So is it, you send out that annual email, that message to the team, you have an all hands meeting. Do you then get feedback from folks, in the weeks or months that follow, coming in and saddling up at the desk here or at the proverbial water cooler and say, hey, Som, that was actually meaningful. And for me this year, I did X, I did Y. And thanks for pushing me to do that. What is that? What's the feedback from the team like?
I get a lot of it. And actually, for the most part, everyone's really excited and energized by, one, leadership that is, focused themselves on growing. And I share a lot of stories around this, around my personal growth in the year. Like I said, we had an offsite this morning, and I spoke at the beginning, and I talked about some of the things that I had learned in the last couple months about things that really changed my dynamic, my principle of how I approach things. And I was sharing that with them because they're now going to go and, read these books and spend some time with this and get some training and coaching around it. So I share a lot of stories around it. But two is, by sending these messages out, what you're doing is just reinforcing. And so people really always appreciate the fact that it is a reminder, because again, half the population of our team, self-motivated. They don't need me to remind them. They're just, they see a carrot in front of them, they're chasing it. They see me leading and they basically want to drive there. And others, they just need a constant, reminder of, hey, I didn't have time. I got really busy. I didn't look at this. Oh, I need to think about that. What are you going to do? I actually, one of the things I did, you might be familiar, but with our friends, we run these things called 52-day challenges, which is, basically this accountability group that we'll, create a 52-day challenge of the things we want to accomplish in 52 days. And then
Fitness,
it's
clean
awesome.
eats,
Yeah, clean eats,
workouts.
all awesome. It's amazing. I ran one with the team a couple of years ago, and people leaned in. And, at the end of the challenge, people came to me and said, that was amazing, because they wouldn't have done it without it. And so to have the CEO, the founder of the organization, leaning in and leading a charge like that, it creates accountability partners. And I think that all I'm trying to do is create accountability partners for everybody. And it's just, I want to be your partner. Everyone's a partner. So they come over and they thank you. They're appreciative of it. But more importantly, they actually tell you about what they did do. They, more than anything else, is that, hey, these are the things I accomplished this past year or in the last couple of months. And I'm really finding this to be really amazing for me.
And I bet you can reflect on that in that moment and be like, man, got a pretty kick-ass team here of
Yeah.
go-getters, people doing big things. And so much of that and so much of your time is on the philanthropic side. And I want to talk a little bit about that, like how you decide to get involved in things that can be really impactful, whether that was the work that you did with, Princess Margaret and cancer research and fundraising, the big raise that you're doing with the University of Toronto now, or, one of the places where we have intersection, which is Civic Action, a youth leadership program here in Toronto. What is what is the drive for you to be involved in philanthropy and not just giving money, but I think equally important, giving your time and your advice and your insight? Where does that come from?
So first off, I go back to, I have a huge debt of gratitude to this country, to the city, to everything it's given me. So my job is to give back in a meaningful way. The story for me actually was, I was in engineering. I've always been an ambitious person. I've always done a lot of things. I've always balanced a ton of things in my life. But I was in engineering, and one of my great buddies, high school buddies, we were getting together, a bunch of us for some beers and meeting in the evening. And we were sitting there, and one of my buddies came in late, and I said, "Where were you?" And he said, "Oh, I was with my little brother." And I knew he didn't have a little brother; he had a little sister. I knew that growing up with him. And I said, "You don't have a little brother?" And he said, "No, I joined Big Brothers of Toronto, and I'm a big brother." And I just looked at him. I said, "Man, like, that's awesome. Tell me more about it." And
How old were you?
I was 20 years old, 19, 20 years old. So I was first year university. And I realized at that moment, I was like, wait a minute, like, I do all these things, but like, you're doing that. That's awesome. Why couldn't I do that? The next week I signed up for Big Brother, and I added that. And it was such an amazing personal reflection on like giving back. I had a wonderful experience. I met this unbelievable young kid. It was just a wonderful experience for me to kind of build a relationship with somebody. I'm a younger brother. I have an older brother, and this is my first real opportunity to spend time with a younger boy and really spend time with him and talk and help them and develop. And he'd lost his father through an accident, and unfortunately, and it was just a wonderful experience. And I will say that that opened my eyes as a human on how to give back. But also, more importantly, it also challenged me on, no matter how busy you are, you always have time. So I made it a very clear, consistent effort in my life to have this as a core thing. I have these 4 quadrants in my life, my family, my health, my career, and my community. And those 4 things are my balances. And, people always say you have to have balance. I don't, you'll never be perfect at everything, but what I care about is if any of those 4 things are out of balance. And that means I'm, really have to lean in to support them. But otherwise, I try to balance all 4 of those things in my life. And what comes out of it is that I just do a lot. And so, I've been involved today. I'm co-chairing the University of Toronto's Defy Gravity. Why? Because a few things in Canada today that we can say we are truly world class. University of Toronto is number 1, number 2, number 3 in the world in a lot of the things it does. It is unbelievable, and I believe in pressing that advantage. And we're going to raise $4 billion, largest campaign in Canadian history. But I will just say is like the opportunity to do something phenomenal for this city, for this country from that platform is amazing. So that's something I'm co-chairing. I'm involved in a number of really great organizations. So Next Canada, which is a entrepreneurship, teaching amazing young individuals the future of how to be an entrepreneur, how to build, how to create, whether that's with a business that they go create or it's a business or something they do inside of an organization they work for. But it is one of the amazing organizations in this country that has really cultivated some unbelievable entrepreneurial talent. And really proud of that organization. Involved in the Art Gallery of Ontario because I believe in culture. I believe in the city dynamic of what culture does what arts do, and I believe in investment in that. So I'm involved in the Art Gallery of Ontario for a long time. And then on top of that, I've supported a lot of other organizations like, Princess Margaret, the hospital community. And we have some of the best hospitals, hospitals in the country. I used to be on Sunnybrook's board, foundation board. But I believe that, helping and supporting and dynamically moving along the different hospitals and so on. I'm involved in supporting sick kids on their AI initiatives. But all of these things are important, and balancing your time, giving back to community, both with your time, your ideas, and your capital are really important. And, I try to encourage people at Purpose, anybody I mentor, anybody I'm involved with, to lean in, because, one of the things, the secrets that they don't tell you about, is that when you do it, it's not just about, giving back. It's also about getting. You learn, you develop, you build networks, you build relationships, and more importantly, I've gained more from my community engagements than anything I've ever built in my career. And so great joy and great surprise, support from it. So it's something I really lean into, and I will continue leaning into. And in fact, as my career winds down at some point, it will only speed up on what I do in our community engagement.
Look, I think you said it well. We have some of the best hospitals in the world. We have some of the best colleges and universities and institutions. We have a thriving arts and culture sector all right here in Toronto. So as you said, press on our advantages. We have the foundation and the ingredients to be one of, if not the best city in the world. We just have to come together to unlock our collective potential. And I want to thank you for being on For the Love of TO. You obviously love this city and you live it. Your leadership, your insights, and your advice. This was a phenomenal episode, and Toronto and this country is richer and better off for your contributions. And I just want to say thanks.
Thank you, Brad, and I'm glad you're doing this. And more importantly, I'm really excited for your next couple of years.
This is For the Love of TO.